Welcome to the debate. So, why do we destroy the very things we say we want?
Yeah, you set a clear goal to get fit, right? You buy the gear, you clear your schedule, and then, you spend the entire weekend just eating junk food on the couch. I have watched myself do this exact thing, just inexplicably tearing down the very project or relationship I was trying to build.
Right, and it is a completely universal human experience. If you are listening to this right now, you have a mountain in your life that you are currently avoiding climbing.
Absolutely.
Today, we are exploring Brianna Wiest's The Mountain Is You to really uncover the core mechanisms of this behavior. And I'll be arguing that self-sabotage is actually, it's a brilliant biological and emotional defense mechanism. It's designed to protect us from the perceived threat of the unfamiliar.
And I'll be taking the other side, contending that while the whole unconscious protection narrative is comforting, self-sabotage is fundamentally a structural failure. It is the absence of personal principles, which is then compounded by our brain's biological addiction to the dopamine of wanting something rather than actually having it.
So to really grasp why we self-sabotage, we have to completely discard the idea that it is a manifestation of weakness or laziness or self-hatred. It is far more subtle and mechanical than that.
Right, it's not just a character flaw.
Exactly. When you experience an unfulfilled need or a fear you just cannot consciously face, your mind doesn't just give up. It finds an alternate, albeit destructive, way to meet that need. We're talking about finding substitutes for legitimate suffering.
Wait, the concept of a substitute for suffering, that originated with Carl Jung's definition of neuroses, didn't it?
It did, precisely. And Jung actually experienced this firsthand as a child. He was an outcast at school, which obviously caused him profound psychological discomfort. And one day, he fell and hit his head. In that brief, disorienting moment of pain, a thought crystallized for him. He thought, maybe I won't have to go back to school.
Wow.
Yeah. His conscious mind was trapped, but his unconscious mind found a loophole. Shortly after that, he began experiencing these sporadic, uncontrollable fainting spells whenever he had to study or go to class.
So his brain just manufactured a physical escape route.
Exactly. It wasn't a biological defect. His unconscious mind had literally solved his problem. The fainting was a protective substitute for the legitimate suffering of facing his peers.
Right.
So, when you blow up a relationship just as it gets serious or gets sick right before a major presentation, you are executing that exact same mechanism. You are finding a way to meet your need for safety sideways, basically avoiding the vulnerability of the unknown.
Look, I get that, but framing a destructive habit as brilliant problem solving, I think that risks romanticizing behavior that actively ruins lives.
How so?
Well, the Jungian framework makes total sense for childhood development, but in modern adult life, attributing your chronic procrastination or your relationship drama to some profound hidden mechanism of self-protection, it just becomes a highly sophisticated excuse for inaction.
I have to disagree there. Identifying the psychological architecture of a behavior is not an excuse. It is a diagnosis. Because if you don't know why a behavior exists, you cannot dismantle it.
True, but the diagnosis often completely ignores the underlying neurochemistry of everyday habituation. I'd argue the true driver of the gap between our intentions and our outcomes is just our inherent dopamine cycle.
You mean the reward pathways?
Exactly. Neuroscience has established that dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure or satisfaction. It is the chemical of pursuit. It is the biological engine of wanting. Think about the last time you spent 3 months obsessing over buying a specific car or securing a promotion.
Oh, yeah.
You read every review, you plotted every single move. Then, the day after you actually get it, you feel absolutely empty.
The arrival fallacy.
Yes, that emptiness isn't some deep-seated, trauma-induced fear of success. It is literally just your brain scanning the horizon for the next target because the pursuit chemical has flatlined.
Right.
When we sabotage a stable relationship or a successful project, we are unconsciously throwing a wrench into the gears so we can return to that highly dopaminergic state of chaos and problem solving. We wreck the peace because, chemically speaking, peace is boring. We lack the architectural principles required to sustain success once that initial dopamine wears off.
But boiling human behavior down to a simple dopamine deficit, I feel like that ignores the profound reality of homeostasis. The brain is not not merely chasing a high, it is aggressively defending its baseline.
Its comfort zone.
Exactly. Homeostasis is essentially the body's thermostat. If your psychological comfort zone, your historical baseline, is set to, say, 65 degrees of mild chaos and anxiety, and suddenly you enter a healthy, loving relationship that brings the temperature up to 75 degrees of peace and security, your nervous system does not celebrate.
It freaks out.
It panics. It literally kicks on the air conditioning to freeze things back down to 65.
So wait, any failure to sustain success is just our internal thermostat acting up.
Basically, yes, because the nervous system is built for survival, not for flourishing. To the primitive parts of our brain, the unfamiliar, even positive, life-changingly good change, it registers as a life-threatening predator. The brain literally cannot differentiate between the vulnerability of becoming your best self and the physical danger of a lion in the brush. Both of those trigger a physiological threat response, elevated heart rate, cortisol spikes, tunnel vision.
Right.
So when someone sabotages a great opportunity, they are not just bored and looking for dopamine, they are terrified. Their brain is pulling the fire alarm to get them back to safety.
I hear you. But if we blame our nervous system's homeostatic upper limit for every single failure to launch, we just end up engaging in what the source material actually calls the trap of justification.
The trap of justification.
Yeah, we start measuring our lives by our internal intentions rather than our external outcomes. We spend enormous energy explaining to ourselves exactly why we couldn't execute a task instead of just redirecting that energy to actually doing it. Take perfectionism, for instance.
Okay.
Perfectionism masquerades as a commitment to high standards, right? But functionally, it is an impenetrable shield against trying.
Well, perfectionists are often deeply anxious people who are just trying to control an uncontrollable environment.
Right, but they are avoiding the real-world risk of failure by engineering a scenario where they never actually begin. I mean, if your desk has to be perfectly organized and the lighting has to be flawless, and you need to read 3 more books before you write the first page, you insulate yourself from judgment.
That makes sense.
The same applies to chronic disorganization. By creating a chaotic schedule, you stay just a few steps away from actually confronting the work. If we sit around saying, "Oh, my nervous system is just trying to protect me," we numb the discomfort of failure with endless psychoanalysis. The greatest act of self-love is brutally honest acknowledgement, stating the problem plainly, saying, "I am actively avoiding this work and I need to stop," without hiding behind the language of trauma.
But you cannot just willpower your way past an actively firing nervous system by stating the problem. When the material discusses trauma, and that includes the accumulated, everyday wounds where we were made to feel unsafe or inadequate, it emphasizes that this history is stored physically in the body.
Right, the body keeps the score.
Exactly. It physically rewires brain architecture. Chronic stress shrinks the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory filing cabinet, and simultaneously it enlarges and hyperactivates the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm bell.
Look, the physiological reality of stress is well documented. I won't argue that. But how does that dictate the choices you make at your desk on a Tuesday morning?
Because without a functioning hippocampus to provide context, your amygdala literally cannot tell time. When you receive a slightly critical email from your boss, your brain doesn't say, "Oh, this is a minor modern inconvenience." It says, "We are under mortal threat."
Right, because the alarm is ringing.
The biological alarm bell is ringing at full volume, and there is no context to dampen it. You cannot just demand that a hyperactive amygdala calm down using logic or sheer discipline. You have to physically release the suppressed emotion and gradually rebuild a sense of safety.
I understand the mechanism, I really do. But focusing entirely on the size of your amygdala or the origin of the trauma, it's like studying the blueprints of a burning house instead of just grabbing a fire extinguisher.
That's a bit reductive, isn't it?
Not really. Knowing that the wiring is faulty in the living room wall is fascinating. But right now, the couch is on fire. You have to put it out.
Yeah, but if you ignore the blueprint, you might throw water on an electrical fire. Throwing standard productivity hacks or harsh discipline at a trauma-induced nervous system response will make the fire explode.
Okay, fair point.
If someone has trauma around money from growing up in terrifying poverty, their nervous system equates financial management with danger. They can't just declare, "Well, I am going to stick to a budget now." They have to slowly expose themselves to the unfamiliar state of financial stability until the nervous system stops sounding the alarm.
But Wiest's material fundamentally actually argues that you do not change in massive emotional breakthroughs. You change in micro shifts. People become totally obsessed with the cinematic epiphany.
The big realization.
Right. They want to sit in therapy, realize why their mother made them feel inadequate at age 7, and expect that realization to magically cure their procrastination. But transformation is staggeringly unglamorous. It is the repetitive compounding of microscopic choices.
Micro shifts like what, though?
Like putting your phone in another room for 20 minutes, drinking a glass of water instead of a second coffee, going to sleep 10 minutes earlier. These micro shifts are the building blocks of principles.
Okay.
Principles are the immutable laws of cause and effect in your life. If you do not possess the principle of living beneath your means, deeply understanding your childhood money trauma will not save you from bankruptcy. Principles are the fire extinguisher. They function as external architecture that dictates your actions precisely when your internal emotional state is panicked or unmotivated. You act in accordance with the principle regardless of how your nervous system feels about it.
Micro shifts are indeed the mechanical steps of change. I agree with that. But relying purely on rigid principles turns life into a white-knuckled endurance test. If you view your emotions merely as obstacles to be suppressed by discipline, you are basically building a pressure cooker. Eventually, it will erupt. Emotions are not weaknesses. They are data. They carry vital navigational information.
I agree that emotions contain data, but how do you separate the signal from the noise? I mean, anger might be a guide, but it is also a highly effective way to torch your career or marriage.
Well, we are socially conditioned to treat anger as a shadow emotion, to be heavily policed. But biologically speaking, anger is a sudden influx of energy designed to mobilize us.
To take action.
Exactly. It shows us exactly where our boundaries have been violated and gives us the fuel to enforce them. When directed inward rather than outward at others, it fuels necessary life changes. Sadness similarly is treated in our culture as a malfunction to be medicated or pushed through, yet it is the physiological requirement for honoring loss. You cannot bypass it.
Okay, but what about the emotions that seem purely toxic, like jealousy?
Jealousy is perhaps the most informative of all. It acts as a mirror. It reveals our true suppressed desires. When you feel intensely jealous of a peer, receiving a promotion, or launching a business, it is a combination of recognizing that they have what you genuinely want and the painful confrontation with your own refusal to pursue it.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Self-mastery is the willingness to sit with these uncomfortable feelings, decode the data they are handing you, and transition from an automatic, unconscious reaction into a deliberate, conscious response.
Decoding the data is crucial. I'm with you there. But there is a massive caveat in the text that derails almost everyone, which is feelings are not facts. This is where the emotional intelligence approach frequently turns destructive. People feel an intense emotion and immediately assume it represents an objective reality about the external world.
Right, the text refers to this as psychic thinking.
Yes, psychic thinking, or a logical lapse. People take an intrusive, dark thought, attach an intense feeling of biological fear to it, and suddenly they treat that emotion as a premonition.
Like they can see the future?
Exactly. They believe their panic is forecasting the future. If you walk into a meeting and feel terrified that everyone is judging you, psychic thinking dictates that everyone actually is judging you. You jump to a worst-case scenario and your brain freezes there, mourning a catastrophe that hasn't even happened. Sitting and validating that feeling endlessly is a trap. The solution outlined in the material is highly rational. You must complete the thinking.
Completing the thought forces you to actually confront the fabricated catastrophe rather than just staring at the shadow it casts.
Exactly. You ask yourself, if the absolute worst case scenario happened, if I get fired today or this relationship ends, what would I do? You walk step by step through the aftermath. You say, I would update my resume, I would call my friend, I would move into a smaller apartment. You force your brain to see that even in the disaster, you have a plan. You prove to yourself that mental strength is not the magical absence of fear, nor is it the naive optimism that nothing will go wrong. It is rational confidence in your own resilience.
And you know, the neurological mechanism behind completing the thought is really fascinating. When you are caught in psychic thinking, all your blood flow and electrical activity is trapped in the amygdala, the fear center.
Right.
By forcing yourself to answer the question, what would I do next, you are literally demanding that your brain perform a logical sequence sequencing task. This pulls the blood flow out of the amygdala and pushes it forward into the prefrontal cortex, which is the center for executive function and logic. You are using a rational exercise to biologically hack your nervous system out of a panic state.
Which perfectly illustrates why we cannot just let our feelings dictate our reality. You have to regulate the biological emotion with logic and principles. You basically refuse to let a dopamine craving or a protective fearful instinct make your decisions for you.
Agency, not to invalidate the initial fear. The feeling of terror in that meeting might not be a factual representation of your coworkers judging you, but it is a factual representation of your internal state.
Fair enough.
It is an accurate reflection of your past experiences of rejection. Overcoming self-sabotage requires immense self-compassion for that internal state. If you are procrastinating or anxious or tearing down your own goals, you must recognize that these behaviors were born from flawed attempts to keep you safe. The mountain we are discussing is exactly this space. It's the massive gap between what the conscious mind desires and what the unconscious mind fears. You cannot bully your nervous system into letting go of those fears. You have to gently, deliberately guide yourself toward the unfamiliar until the unfamiliar finally registers as home.
Bullying oneself is entirely ineffective, I agree. But self-mastery demands radical responsibility. It means recognizing that your mountain is not the fluctuating economy. It is not your difficult childhood. And it is not the people who have wronged you. The mountain is you. While mapping your trauma and understanding your nervous system's demand for safety is an excellent diagnostic tool. Diagnosis is not a cure. True change only materializes through the ruthless, consistent application of principles. It requires the grit to endure the discomfort of those micro shifts day after day, regardless of what your homeostatic impulse is screaming at you. You have to act your way into a new way of feeling. You cannot simply feel your way into a new way of acting.
That brings us to a crucial point of convergence, I think. Whether we approach this by soothing the nervous system's threat response or by establishing rigid principles to override our biological dopamine traps, the ultimate promise of the material remains the same. The mountain in front of you is not an external obstacle placed there by the universe to punish you.
No, it is the exact customized challenge required to teach you the specific skills you currently lack. Every moment of self-sabotage that you uncover, dissect, and dismantle builds the precise resilience and self-awareness needed to sustain the life you are trying to create.
It is the process of positive disintegration, which is really just a clinical way of saying that your old self-concept literally has to fall apart and turn to ash so you can build something stronger in its place. The version of you that required self-sabotage to feel safe simply cannot exist in the future you want.
And that transformation is permanent. You don't revert to who you were before you picked up all these defensive habits. You become an entirely new entity, someone who could never have existed without standing at the base of that mountain and deciding to climb it in the first place.
So look closely at the gap between what you say you want and what you actually do on a daily basis. Is your mountain built from the heavy echoes of past protection, or does it exist because of the sheer absence of present principles? The path to the summit requires understanding your own unique architecture. There is much more to uncover within your own self-examination.